Dr. Sophie Messager, and this is the Wisdom Messenger podcast. In this show, I interview pioneers in women's health and personal development about groundbreaking concepts that help women reclaim lost knowledge and restore inner wisdom. By bridging insights from ancient traditions and modern research, we question stale cultural narratives and midwife a new paradigm around birth, life transitions, and women's autonomy. Join me as we delve into stories and studies that empower women to reconnect with their inner voice and live their truth. Tune in as we rediscover what it means to fully trust ourselves and shape our collective future. In this episode, I interview Laura Leongomez. Laura is a priestess-witch, mother, and doula. Laura is also a workshop facilitator and trainer, a writer, artist, massage and song therapist from Colombia, living and working in magical Pembrokeshire. We discuss trance as our birthright, exploring altered states of consciousness during birth and other rites of passage. So welcome to this episode of the Wisdom Messenger. In this episode, I am delighted to interview Laura Leongomez, and we are going to be talking about trance as a birthright for women through life transition. So Laura is a priestess, a mother, a doula, a massage and voice therapist from Colombia. And, she has a lot of experience in trance states, and what we wanted to discuss in this episode is that there is more to trance than the idea of trance through psychedelic or through drumming. So, to get us started, I just thought, can we talk about trance as our birthright? And maybe going back a bit, I thought maybe we need to define what trance is. So I'd love to hear what your definition of trance is, Laura.
Well, trance is obviously an altered state of consciousness, and I'm not gonna go into official descriptions of it because there's plenty of that online. But for me, trance or altered states is a bridge into that portion of our reality that we're not usually in contact with. So it's a bridge between our individual self and the universe or the spirit. It's a bridge between our conscious and subconscious mind, or the material world and the spirit world, or any way you want to call it. It's like in our conscious mind, we are like, say, a finger, like alone in the world without knowing why it bends or moves or does this or does that. And when we're in altered states, that finger is aware that is part of a hand, that is part of a body, that is part of a bigger consciousness, and then its movement makes sense. Its being makes sense. So being in an altered state of consciousness basically is becoming your whole self.
Yeah.
Or that's how I interpret it.
What I found really interesting when I've been, listening to and reading around trance because of my work using drumming for trance is that in our culture, I think we have a distrust and fear of trance. And there are also trances that are acceptable, like being on your phone. So, just want to give examples like I think most people, when they think trance, they think about loss of control.
Yeah.
And they also think about psychedelics, and they also think about something that's like a really big process rather than something that happens to you all the time in your daily life.
Yeah.
So a simple trance state for me is like when you're driving your car and you have not realized how you've arrived because you've gone into this car autopilot and you're thinking about something else, and you're like, oh, how did I get home? That's a trance.
Yeah. Totally, because there's levels of trance, there's levels of altered state. So obviously when you're like daydreaming, or I think we forget because of cultural matters that trance is part of life. Like it can happen involuntarily, like you just said, like when you get too distracted or when you're lost in your phone, that is a trance state. When you're daydreaming when you're sort of asleep, but not really, just before, just when you go to bed. So all of those are levels of trance state.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to mention, because then it takes away a bit the fear and the, you know, that feeling that is something so unknown and so like foreign to our normal experience of life, when it really isn't. It's part of who we are, and we do it to different levels all the time.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said as I listen to you to how disconnected we are to trance in our culture, you know, that we're so unused to experiencing deep trances, like the kind of that I'm expecting we're going to talk about, like birth trance, like community trance, you know. And I remember that when I started going dancing, you know, the kind of conscious dance that I do, go 5 rhythm, and the first few months I experienced and danced, I was really shocked to realize that there was moments in the dance where I felt like I was high.
Yeah, totally.
You know, that you can get, which, you know, tags leads us very well to talking about birth as a trance state, because you can get high on your own hormones alone. You know, you can get that state of ecstasy, that state of bliss, that state of outer consciousness in a very positive way that is transformative. So, you know, trance for birth, what's that about for you? Trance happening during birth?
Trance. So yes, if we kind of elaborate on that idea that trance is natural to our life, and that we kind of dip into it to different levels depending on the experiences we're having, and knowing that trance states can be produced by hormones. For example, if you look it up, orgasm comes up as a sort of trance.
Yeah.
Right. So
in fact, the French call it la petite mort, the little death, you know,
the little death. Yeah, exactly, because that's what it is. And if you kind of work over that, because birth is as well a hormonal, sexual, very embodied experience, then it's like amplifying that sort of trance that you would experience, say during sex, to like the deepest possible state ever. And I think it's very sad that we don't have the chance to experience that, like to a greater scale culturally. The other day I was talking to my partner, and he said, like, I don't know, we were watching like a birth scene on the telly, and he was like, oh, I bet you wouldn't do that again. And I was like, no, I would totally do that again. If it wasn't for the fact that I don't want to have any more children, like if I could just give birth again, I would totally give birth again. Like, that was amazing. And amazing. It makes me almost like tear up a bit, because it's just something that there's no other ways to experience what you experience there. And as you said, it's completely like it's not chemically induced, it's not trauma induced, it's just your hormones doing what they're supposed to do. Which is, it just blows my mind, because that's how we should experience birth all the time. So isn't it just like terrifying that we don't?
I know. The other day I found myself talking to a young woman at a gathering who has not had children yet, and she said, I'm very scared of giving birth. And I used to feel exactly the same. And in fact, what led me to become a doula was that I had such a powerful experience, and I felt, oh my God, I've been lied to. Like everything I've been led to believe, like I've been conditioned to believe about birth. And the experience I had was so polar opposites. I thought, because, you know, we present birth as being, you know, only painful, only horrible, only. And, you know, this young woman is somebody who's just tried to, she runs ultra marathon. So this summer she attempted to run 100-mile marathon, right? Okay. So I said to her, when you ran that thing, there was pain, right? And she said, yes. And yet you're going to do it again. I said, it's the same thing. And, you know, I also told her exactly what you said. I said, I'd do it again. I don't want any more children either, but I felt so transformed and empowered and like rewired from the whole experience. And it
Totally.
was just such a sense. Even today, when you'd go to any meditation and they say hook up to a like really positive experience in your life or something, and that's what I do. I remember the first burst, because the second one, since I'd already done it, it was powerful, but not as much.
Not as much.
But it was still really powerful. But I think the rewiring had already occurred. So I came to, believe that I would really like to hear what you think about that. That our culture is so scared of trance, but also the kind of trance that happen during birth, if it's supported to happen in the context that how it can happen, if it's supported to happen as is meant to happen, as nature intended, it's going to really change you. And so society doesn't want that. So because you can't control a woman who's had the experience that we've had. When after I gave birth to my son, I went to a birth conference in 2006, and there was like Michel Audin and Ina May Gaskin and Frédéric Leboyer and lots of names. Yeah, everyone. And this woman said to me, I had my son in a sling, he was 4 months old, and she said, our culture doesn't want people to have births like yours, because look at you. Look at what's happened to you. Because that's why I left science, because of that experience. I was like, I want to help other women to have the same experience I had. And so I have developed a theory that our culture doesn't just interfere with birth for the sake of interfering, like for the sake of safety, masquerading as safety, but because it's deeply fearful of the power that's going to happen. Do you see? And it's actively interrupting the trance. It's not conscious. I don't believe any doctor. I've never met a doctor or midwife who goes, I'm going to interrupt the trance, because I don't even know it's trance. That's the other thing that really blew my mind when I started researching what all the concept of trance, because of the book I'm writing on drumming for birth and drumming for women through life transition. I went, oh my God, there is like nobody I've not met anyone inside the system, maybe a handful. But the average professional inside maternity care in the Western world, they don't even know that birth is a trance. Because one of the things I did do is try to find the research. There's none been any.
Of course not.
It's not there. I met one midwife, in Australia, Jane Hardwick Collins, who talked to me about some research that was done in Russia, where they put EEG electrodes on the scalp of women in labor, and they showed the change in states of consciousness, but I couldn't find a study. I don't think it's one of those things that probably was done and not published about. And I was like, that's not been studied. So of course it's not in the consciousness of anyone in the field.
No. I think you would have to, even working as a birth practitioner, I wonder how many times do you really have access to an experience that is, like that.
Yeah.
I have to say that I was so lucky, because unlike you, I became a doula first, and did all that, and then had a baby. But I was very lucky that the first birth I ever attended was, I would say, a true experience of what is trance during birth. And that for me was like, it just blew my mind. Like, I was already convinced that this is the way we should give birth, and I was already a doula and all that, but I had never seen it.
Yeah.
And being there was like, how have we got this so backwards? Like, what have we done? Because it was beautiful and amazing, and like I still have it like imprinted in my brain.
Yeah, I believe that, because as you speak, I've seen myself through, not my first birth as a doula. My first birth as a doula ended up in a cesarean, but my second birth as a doula was a birth center birth that was like extremely beautiful and straightforward. And still, as you speak, I'm like seeing that, thinking, I felt like that too,
And the thing about this birth is that how it happened was so like opposite to what people would expect from a birthing situation, or how they would feel like safe. Look, so just to give you a few ideas, like we hadn't met the couple, because it wasn't like our couple. They were working with another midwife that couldn't make it that day, right? I think it was Ramiro actually who was in charge of that birth, but he obviously had another one, and then we went in.
Do you want to briefly say who Ramiro is for people
Yeah,
listening?
so Ramiro is an indigenous midwife from Colombia, and he's a medicine person. And when I started studying, we were very close, and I learned a great deal of stuff from him, and a very small group of midwives that were trying to like bring a bit of like tradition into like the mainstream
Yeah.
midwifery. It was only honestly a handful of us doing this back in the day, and now, and I'm glad to know it's grown. But
were they talk about trance in the context of that learning?
no, I don't
No.
think we did a lot. I mean, not like that, not as such.
Yeah, yeah.
We touched on like, we obviously you kind of go through like or orgasmic birth a
Yeah, yeah.
bit, and you, but not as such, because I think this is not really like thought of, as you said. But anyway, this birth, so we went in with my other with the midwife that was a friend of mine, Carolina. She was attending, and I was just there to learn because it was the first time, but we hadn't met them before, and they had just moved houses. It was a very young couple. They had moved houses recently, so everything was in boxes.
Yeah.
They have moved into like the deepest of the countryside. Like,
yeah.
there was nothing there to. So I asked Carolina when we went there, they're like, what happens if something goes wrong? Because we're like in the depth of the mountain, you know. And she said, well, nothing can go wrong then. And we went in, and honestly, nothing went wrong. They only had a mattress on the floor, and
Yeah.
she was already there. You know, I just came in, and I just started like singing with her and like swaying, and I hadn't even met this woman before. And from there, it just went on really smoothly, and it was so beautiful and so perfect. And because it was so precarious in a way, that's what like blew my mind off even more. It's like, oh, like you can do this even when you think you're in circumstances that you could not do it, you know? That makes sense. So from there I kind of really got into it, because I was really just amazed of what the body and the mind can do.
Yeah.
And how you can enter that sort of like bubble, that altered space. Is like when you're a doula, you enter plane.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, as I listen to you, I realize I think it's not totally true what I said. It's not talked about in the scientific world, but I think everybody who's been at a birth has noticed that step over the threshold, because you can't not see. Like, it's like even if the system is based on you must have contraction every blah blah minutes, and for every blah blah long, and dilation this, and measuring of like patriarchal measures that. I mean, the number of times I've been at births for the first time couple, and I said to the partner when he said, should we go to the hospital? And the woman is still like chatty, like still in, normal, like awake state.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you'll know when it's time, because she'll stop talking to you, and she looked like she's gone into another planet. And often the partner would say, that thing you've talked about, it's happened. So I think people see it. It's just that because it's not discussed, it's not labeled, it's not talked about as it's not like it's witnessed, and you cannot, like what you describe, when every time I arrive at a bus, and as a doula I would take one look, and I would know whether the woman was in that or that, that and often the look on the face is what I call the oxytocin face. It looks like the woman is just had sex.
You're in trance, like as I said, like as the same as when you've just had an orgasm. You're in that place of otherworldly place. And I find it, and it's so powerful, and this is really cool actually. It's so powerful that state, that trance state, that you, not being the one birthing, can enter that trance state with her, Because every time I obviously you have noticed this. Yeah, when the birth is over, so after I had some that were like 3 day long,
Yeah.
and then you come out to like the street, and you honestly feel like you're stepping out of, I don't know, well, you know what I'm talking about. It's like coming into reality.
I tell you the other thing, Laura, that really fascinated me. It took me years to understand that. In fact, I think I'm still unlayering, understanding it. Is every time I supported a birth, I would feel really open energetically for days
Yeah.
afterwards. And
Yes.
I had this weird feeling that I should not close it too soon, otherwise I would miss out on the insight.
Yes. Like a
And so
dream.
often after a birth, I would go and see my osteopath, and he would give me a very specific treatment, which consisted in rocking my spine whilst taking my heartbeat and rocking my spine at the rhythm of my heartbeat. Something he invented and called a heartbeat massage. And he would, during that massage, I would have the most amazing visual of why I was there
Wow.
at the birth. You know, what was
Yeah.
my presence for?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the births have been beautiful and sometimes it not. You know, sometimes the births have
Mm.
been a cascade of intervention and traumatic for the mother and traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, that for me, that what you just described is because we go into that state with people. You know, if it's happening the way, if
It
that
should be.
process is supported to unfold, is allowed to unfold, we merge with that consciousness. So of course there's a sense of like doing something sacred, but also that energy goes kind of flows through you as well.
Yes, that's because of our need to be resonant.
Yeah.
Like you just need to go into that entrainment. It's just natural for us, isn't it? And it's just, which we can talk about this later, but so just to make a mental note, which is why a communal trance, like
Yeah.
why it works as a community, sort of like medicine. But let's talk about that later. I just wanted to say before that when you were saying that you don't want to, that when you come out of the birth you don't want to leave it like closer too soon because you'll
Yeah.
miss out. It made me think of when I do like dream interpretation therapy,
Yeah.
and I always tell people, like, as soon as you wake up, don't like turn on the light and step
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
bed. Just like start writing down, even if it's really dark, because
Yeah.
then you let all the information flow into your
Mm.
consciousness, such as what you're describing. And then you wouldn't, because we shut it too soon. And it's the same because dreaming is another altered state. So when you're dreaming and you stop it just like that, all that information that you're referring about is stopped, and then
Yeah.
it cannot enter your consciousness. So it really is like stepping somewhere else and coming back. And that's why I was saying being able to control those trance states, what gives you is a permanently open door to
Yeah.
like this place where you can go retrieve information, bring it back. And it's so
Mm.
useful because, as you said, you can get very specific information of why things are the way they are,
Yeah.
which is amazing. And another thing that you made me think of when you were talking about this is how in my experience, most of the times I went to a birth, I was on my period.
Yes, I've heard lots of people talk about that. Would
And
your
that
period start at the birth, or would you be on your period before the birth?
just before, or
Yeah, because I've heard lots and lots of doulas tell me they had to put their moon cup in,
yeah,
the menstrual cup in, because they would bleed.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I've never had that myself. But what I did have is contractions when a client. So, like, knowing that a client was going into labor, even though she'd not communicated with me, not with everyone, but usually with people I had a really deep connection with. Like, I remember once being at warrior practice and having like so many cramps and thinking she must be into labor, and keep looking at my phone thinking, and no call. And then the next morning I texted her saying, how are you doing? And she's like, I had contraction from 8 o'clock until midnight. And then my toddler woke up and it stopped. When the second time mothers their labor often
yeah,
chunks because the needs of the first child can interrupt things. And I was like, okay, and I also remember being at a birth where the women had hired me to drum at a birth, actually, where she was in early labor. I wasn't inside the house. I stepped out into a garden. She lived in some kind of community, space where there were a lot
Yeah.
of people who chose to live. So I was out there between houses talking to someone who, interestingly, someone had been a doula that I just bumped into in the street, And then I felt contractions, and the husband came and said, "You need to come back because we need to go to
It's
the
amazing, isn't
center."
it? We're
I was like, he
so
didn't even, like, before the husband even spoke, I was like, something's happening and I need to go back in, and yeah, there's been, so the connection, between people, and asking yourself, who does it belong to? And that stuff, I love that analogy you took about the finger and the hand, because, yeah. So, moving on to like trance as a birthright, tell me more about what makes you think that we need trance as humans. What does trance do for us that's good, and why is it that we need it back in, especially in a culture that tends to like not really support? Because I think there are different levels of trance. Like I said, being on your phone is a form of trance, but it's not one that's going
positive.
to be good for you, particularly like life enhancing and bringing you amazing information. Or it might bring amazing information, it depends, but like explain to me what you mean by trance as a birthright.
Well, I guess why I consider it a birthright is because, as I explained, like with that thing about the hands, that means that we are missing out currently of being in touch with our whole self. So we should be like entitled to be the totality of who we are, and not only be in touch with the deepest parts of our individual self, but to be in touch with humanity, nature, spirit, the universe. So we should be allowed as beings that are alive to be as alive as we can be. And I think that that we used to be at some point. We were more in touch with everything. We were more in touch with ourselves, with divinity, or however you want to call it, with nature, obviously. And when we lost that bridge, we lost ourselves, basically. When I was studying dreams and all that, I was reading a book about Carl Jung, where it said the problem with like science and the era of the rational mind is that when we started explaining everything that was mysterious, and we started also cutting those bridges, like because we demystified the world, we thought this is not real, so we just cut it off. But it is real to the extent that like our subconscious mind is most of our mind. So when we cut all the ties, all the bridges, when we stop ritual, when we stop symbolic language, when we stop thinking about our dreams and etc., we just lost the communication. It's like we lost a way of speaking to our own selves. And now we are completely detached. We have unlearned this language. We cannot communicate with our deeper selves. We are lost and we're alone. We feel small, we feel disconnected, we feel just confused. And it's because we don't know how to recover that language. And let's say our symbolic landscape of our minds is like depleted, because we've knocked down all symbolic language as if it didn't mean anything, but it means everything. So when we lost the state of trance as a tool, we lost our way to being in touch with all of what we are. And this is why it is our birthright. We are entitled to be who we are, but in our totality. And of course, I think that there is an active, unconscious, like interruption of trance and all these other mechanisms, because then people would be powerful. And it's like what you were saying, after you see a woman that has given birth at home, or like by trance, in a state of trance, even if wherever this was, this woman is changed. This woman is powerful. This woman is cannot be like beaten down, you know, because you think like, if I did that, I can do anything.
Yeah.
So if you imagine if humans were constantly in that state of empowerment, like if you all the time felt, oh, if I can do this. And I think whenever you go through ritual, through deep ceremony or whatever, this is the feeling that you get, as what you were saying with the marathon, you know. Like once you
I mean,
that,
runner's high is a form of trance. It's a recognized form of trance. You know, when people do really difficult physical feats, they often go into that altered state. Their endorphins is known to do that to your brain the same way it does it in birth, shut down your cortex and make you go into the sort of more ancient brain, you know, the reptilian brain, and the it's what's really interesting is, you know, one of the things in the research I've done is I've noticed that we as a culture, one of the distrust of trance we have is that we associate trance with savages. We associate trance with, you know, like when people watch, you know, would go and watch voodoo or any kind of communal trance when they went, you know, when the colonialism meant that people would go into this culture and go, oh, you know, like this, like it looks really weird, I don't like it, because again, we live in a very dualistic culture that thinks you can either be a Cartesian rational thinking individual or the kind of that weird thing that they
that wild thing.
You can't be both, you know, like you like we live in a very controlled culture, you know, like you have to look
totally,
you have to look good, you know, you have to like be dressed correctly, you have to mind your manners, and the idea that you can't be that and that is, I think we're very scared of that. We're very scared of the, you know, loss of control that comes with trance. And I run drum circles. I've been running drum circle for 3 years, and whenever I run drum circles, and you know, the last one I ran last week, there was like 17 of us, and it makes power, you know, when we drum. It's like, and also it takes a life of its own. Sometimes it's really soft and deep and grounding. Sometimes it's really wild, and one of the rounds of drumming was really wild. And sometimes I'm in the middle of that, and I kind of imagine myself watching it, walking in from the outside.
And it looks nuts.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's really an interesting experience to have in the midst of it, to think, oh, this is how a Western person, like somebody who doesn't understand what being in it feels like, which is why I think people need to have the experience, and then they realize it's a life-affirming experience.
Yeah.
You know, and the community I'm in, we dance every Friday night. We dance 5 rhythms. There's sometimes 70 of us. You know, it's just a big community, and people, I believe one of the reason the community is so supportive and well connected with each other is because we meet in physical spaces and we do this type of work together, and you can't have a community that's built on just meeting people on Zoom.
No,
as much as I love technology, and which is allowing us to record this podcast and allowing us to chat and stuff, and I love that, but I think it really needs, so that leads us very well into, you know, the idea of community trance. Tell me more about what your ideas on that are.
Well, first, elaborating on what you just said, definitely we are totally scared. There is a big barrier there for experiencing community trance, because obviously this need to appear like normal and rational is obviously with regards to other people, right? So like you wouldn't mind if you're like if you go a bit nuts dancing in your room or singing in the shower, but you would mind if other people are seeing you. So we have a massive barrier in place if we are even trying to look at communal trance, and unless it's in like very specific situations, like classes or, you know, things like that. It starts off as creating a bit of safe space, let's say, where people feel like they can go a bit further out. So you imagine, you wouldn't know like the amount of people that work with me, say in one-on-one sessions, doing noises and kind of going through little levels of trance through sound.
Yeah.
And then when I ask them to do this or that exercise for a couple weeks, and then we meet again, and they're like, but you mean at home? And my neighbor, but I'm with my, like my neighbors, and they don't want to do these like weird noises.
Yeah.
And be judged, right? So we have so much fear about being seen as out of it. and be seen as wild or crazy. And I mean, it's normal. It's just normal because we've spent thousands of years being punished for being crazy, for being weird, for being
powerful.
For being powerful, of course. That's so it's only understandable that people are so scared. But we have to remember that there is going back to the beginning, that trance state is everywhere, and we just need to make ourselves aware. For example, it is accepted to go to like a rave and be in a state of trance with other people, or go to a festival and be with like masses and masses of people dancing, and people think, or this is my opinion, they think that the feeling of joy that they take away from these experiences is because of the drugs. But it's not because of the drugs, it's because of the state of trance, because of the altered states. And that altered states can be accessed through other means. We can also talk about that in a minute. But thinking of that, imagine, for example, I used to go to church, being brought up a Catholic, and I always was very, like, I was very called to do something mystical. So I was, being that the only space I had to develop that aspect of myself, then I loved going to mass.
And so how was mass in your experience? Because I was brought up as a Catholic, and I hated going to mass because my experience of mass, it was really boring and tedious, and there was no joy into any of the mass process because it was all so westernized and so serious, and so like even the singing was tamed down.
Yes. Okay.
I'd like, because just to give you an example, I challenged the priest when I reached my teen, when I left the system, because I was like, give me like African American gospel, give me that kind of singing, and the joy that I believe that kind of translating is really achieved in churches that practice like that. But I didn't see any of that happen in my experience of.
So this is massive, what you're saying, because obviously one of my, I don't know, work premises is that you can achieve trance through singing, right?
Yeah.
And definitely, for me, going to mass was about the singing. Like, that's how I got off.
But how was the singing in your experience of church?
Depending on the church you went to, obviously there'll be like really stale, boring churches. But I had I was lucky that the one that was near us that we went to had loads of young people that were in charge of the singing, and the singing was, well, beautiful, and I really get lost in it. And that's what I liked about mass. I would even like tear up during mass. This is how like moving it could be for me. And when I started moving, obviously you outgrow the church because you have to, especially as a woman. It's like, I don't fit in here, really, do I? And when I lost that, I'm still grieving that, because it's very hard to rebuild. Especially when we've been through COVID, and because I had like a nice little intuitive singing thing going in Bristol. I ran it for like a year or so. I met some amazing women there that would come and sing improvise, and it was amazing. But then COVID happened, then I had a baby, then I moved to Wales. So it's like I've been I haven't been able to build that again. So definitely there's when you have experienced communal trance, there's a massive grief of not being able to find it easily elsewhere. And as you said, people are very scared of these sort of activities in general. They're very unsure, and when and they're very, especially emitting sounds, it's like there's a massive fear there too. It's like, no. People struggle.
I mean, there's certainly, you know, I'm very lucky that I've had the opposite experience to you. The whole last few years have brought me into the fold of a very conscious community. And what I find fascinating is, you know, I've been like teaching workshop for over 10 years. And in my workshop, I usually lead a small ceremony where I sing, and I encourage people to join into the singing and to notice how many people just don't, because they're so scared of singing. My theory is people are scared of singing, drumming and dancing.
Yes.
When they're part of humanity, but in our culture is seen as something only special people can do.
Yes.
That training, you know, so in my current community, people sing off key, but they sing fully, you know, they sing, and I love it. At the beginning, I was a bit like, oh God, they're not singing in the right, you know, like key. And there are a few people really sing off key, but they sing really with their heart. And I was like, I'd much rather have that than the kind of restraint, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't sing, you know,
totally.
not opening your mouth and not opening your heart.
Totally.
And the other thing, you know, I found really interesting is when some of the reading I've done around trance says that communities would have had, and I'd like to explore this some more with you, communities would have had regular trance work in order to release trauma.
Yeah.
They would be held within communities around the world, everywhere in the world, processes that allowed people, because life will, you know, knock you, and processes that allowed people to like communally express grief or communally express something, like really stuff that is installed inside their body. And because we don't have that anymore, and also the other thing that has come sideways from that research to me is to realize how our entire culture of therapy is only talking to the head.
Oh my God.
As if the head, you know, as if the head is some kind of like your head, like your body's just a vehicle for the brain, and everything's happening here. And now I'm really having like almost allergy to the way, because it's so shallow.
Yes.
I remember reading this story about this, can't remember which African country, there'd been a genocide, and they sent therapists to try and help. And the people said, oh, they made us walk into a boring gray room with just a table and chair to talk about our trauma, to talk about our feelings. They said, where was the dancing? Where was the singing? Where was the stuff that could remind yourself of the joy? You know, and I was like, yeah, that's Western therapy all along. You know, it's
my God.
that construct you're talking about of it being disconnected. It's a concept.
Yeah.
Right, all of it is like in here. So sorry, I'm gonna stop being on my soapbox about it now. But
this is so important that you brought this up, because I think like we're totally missing the point. Like for me, it's been a bit of let's say a bit of a shock to understand what therapy means here in this context.
Yeah.
Because I used to say what I do is therapy, but therapy here is like counseling, and you know, sitting down and talking. In Colombia, I guess because we're part of this like multicultural sort of like mix of things, when you go to holistic therapies, they're really out there. Like they're really out there, and it's normal. Like I don't find, you know, like if you step into the world of holistic therapies, it's not like to go and have a little massage and a little reflexology and that's that. No, it's to like really step on it and do like, I've done some weird stuff, you know, like, and for me and the community of people I had around, it was like just the thing to do, you know. Normal.
I mean, I'm going to make, because I'm aware that not everybody listening to this podcast may have had the kind of experience we have. I'm going to bring it back down one level to know you're a massage therapist, and tell us more about, because massage can make you go into a altered state of consciousness.
Totally.
I judge the good massage by the fact that if my head is down in
Yeah.
the face hole and I notice that I'm drooling, that's a good massage. I'm not
Yeah.
asleep, but I mean, that's such a deep state. So I remember, Laura, you told me once that, you learned massage holistically, like intuitively. And then when you came to the UK, you had a different experience. I'd like you to tell us more about that, because I think it will help people who may, I'm sure there's people listening who will have that experience that we're talking about. But if it's like almost like too theoretical for,
Yeah.
unless you've had the chance, because very few of us in the Western world are given the space to have those big communal trance experience outside of raves and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah, your
So
experience of massage in
my
Colombia
experience
versus
with every
here.
it's just yes, you're right. Like I forget how like exotic these experiences can be and how normal they were for me. And it's right, it's true. It's the thing that happens with massage is exactly the same that what happens with everything else. It's being caught to its very like most like minimal components, as in you have to learn these bones and you have to learn the muscles and it's stale and it's boring for me. Maybe not for everyone, but for me, coming from a learning process that was completely intuitive and completely holistic, like as you have to be one with the warmth and you have to be one with the spine and you have to visualize and all these things you have to do before even massaging someone, and you're like in a rhythm. You have to have so many things come into play, and I was never taught in my process back at home. I was never taught about muscles, as in you have to learn this is this muscle, this is that muscle. So when I came here, it was a bit of a shock, and in a way I felt very threatened, obviously, because I was like, oh, like I don't have this sort of knowledge, I don't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
I don't and people would ask me like, so that pain there, what muscle is this? And I'm like, it's your back muscle. so so at the beginning I was very insecure, but then with time I was like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm doing like this to a different level, and my process is still like correct, because there is such a fear about intuitive processes. It's the same fear of trance. It's the fear of not being rationally in control. And that's why when we go to therapy, we just want to talk, because we want to put everything through words and pass everything to that like rational sieve.
But
Because
you see, the theme of everything we're talking about here is like the patriarchy model we're in is that you outsource your knowledge to an authority figure, right? So the
yes,
authority figure knows, you don't, right?
yes,
And
yes,
so the idea that exponential learning doesn't count, it's all about outsourcing. One of the things that popped into my mind as you were talking is I've just finished reading a book called Witches, Midwives and Nurses. It
yeah,
talks about the witches. It's a small book about the burning of witches that was written in the States in the 1970s. And I had no idea in there it says that when male doctors started being trained, they learned only about the theory of medicine in their training. They never saw a patient.
but
And they
still,
came out of this training and they just started applying what they'd learned. And they dismissed all the traditional women healers. So those were like white men in the sort of higher rank of societies. And
yeah,
then treating the population, treating the poor people, were the women healer who had the opposite form of knowledge, but also an enormous amount of knowledge that was
yes,
based on experience and very holistic. And so those people came and they basically like would really harm patients because they had no understanding of, they would just apply blindly what, a bit like what you talked about the massage. What makes a good massage is, for me, it's not just the training, it's how the person is present.
yeah,
And I've been at massage where clearly the person is thinking about what they're gonna have for dinner or something, you know, like thinking about their shopping list or something, and then not there. They're just like moving your skin, and for me, that's really shit. I've been in really posh massage places, never again. You know, like I've been to like this kind of really nice looking studio in the center of Cambridge because they just opened, and they did a tour, and it was free to do a tour, and they give you half price massage, and I was like, oh my god, this is the worst massage I've ever had. And it
I
looked
know.
very pretty, but it was really shit, you know.
It's
And
very
again,
hard to get a good massage. Very hard.
yeah, I mean, what's really hard for me now is my standards have even gone higher every time.
Yes.
It's sort of, so I churn through people. You know, I try people, and after a while, I'm like, I need somebody else. So now, for instance, I'm looking at someone because of all the energy work I'm doing who could, you know, release attachments and anything that
Yeah.
floats energetically is not mine. And I'm not finding that.
It's
If
very
people do
hard.
either this or that, you know, there's like, I would like basically someone like me, but you know,
Yes.
you can do it to yourself, but it's like,
Yes, it's difficult, especially when you are like out of your, I mean, obviously you're like, yeah, your expectations now because of your experiences of trance have made it so much harder for you to like be, and it's the same for me. Like when I was training on massage, like we would do, I don't know, really long sessions with people that you don't necessarily know too well, but you know, they massage you, you're like naked.
yeah,
And they're massaging like really deep, and you're making noises, and you're like honestly somewhere else.
yeah.
And these are my experiences of massage. So obviously it is very
I mean, the
clinical.
other, you know, again, this is a bit of a side tangent on trance, but you know, the other experience that fascinates me is that in the UK, massage therapists step out of the room whilst you get undressed.
Yeah.
And I find that very odd because you're going to see my body.
Yeah.
And the first time I went to have Lomi massage, so you just reminded me I have a friend who does really good Lomi. Yeah, I have a
Nice.
couple of friends, but they're often very busy because the ones
Yes,
who are really
because
good,
they're good.
you have to book them weeks in advance. But I went to this Lomi massage, and there was like this paper pants in the middle of the massage table, and I said, "What's that for? This massage is done naked." And this woman went, "Oh yeah, but British people don't like naked." But
It's
the
true.
Lomi, there's a lot of like elbow, like the front of the arm massage from the shoulders all the way to the feet, going through the. Again, you know, boundaries, because what I find really strange is in our culture we don't massage the belly and we don't massage the buttocks. You know, we are very like we massage the back and maybe the arms and legs, but you know it's all narrowed down, it's all boxed in, it's all like
And it's
what's
just come from,
acceptable.
it's the same thing about fear. Look, I'll tell you, I had an experience teaching. So I go back to Bristol every now and then to do a bit of CPD with a therapist. So I go and just have a bit of play, and I teach them some moves, and we talk about massage. And I remember that I was showing them this very like, all my moves are very, I train in Lomi too, so all my moves are very like involved, and I use basically most of my arm, and I bring it back and forth. But that means that you require a certain closeness to the person. And these moves that are so fluid and so long are to create that state of trance, right? Because it's like a being in a
figure of eight type of movement around the body, because you know
exactly. So you need to create flow, and it's that flow that creates the trance state. And I remember when I was so we were practicing, and I showed on someone, I demonstrated, and then one of the therapists that was there came in, and I did it on her. And she said, "Oh my God, when you were doing it, I was thinking like that is way too close to the client. Like I would never do that. Like that looks horrible." And then she said, "But now that you're doing it on me, no, this feels amazing." And it's because we have such a like a boundary so strong in our bodies and in ourselves, and in the experiences that we allow for ourselves. And that's why this same fear of closeness, of proximity, is the same fear of movement, is the same fear of sound, is the same fear of trance, is the same fear of being out of control because you're getting too wild. But I would argue that we only get like negatively wild when we don't have those experiences, because those experiences are what keep us in check, like grounded.
Yeah.
And when we're detached from them, then we create like pathological states in which, because we're not having those experiences, we are creating like some sort of like repressed experience of
But you
ourselves.
mean like, for instance, when people go to trance and then they take drugs and they like, it's like there's no in between. Is that what you're talking about?
Or when people go like, say here, when people get drunk and they behave horribly, it's because because there's no other outlet for emotion, for processing grief, joy, pain, or whatever. Then we have to do it in that way, which is a completely disconnected, like sort of aggressive, lost and pointless way. So yeah, I would say that is these activities that seem wild and out of control, which allow us to actually be in control and at peace and in flow. When we don't have them, then we are completely out of sync with life. Then that's when we become ill in our minds, in our hearts, in our bodies, because we're not in touch. We're not in touch with anything.
And when you say touch, I'm also thinking how we don't touch in our culture. I know you're from Colombia, it's a very different culture, but I remember reading an anthropologist's work that went around various countries in the world and sat in cafes and wrote down how often people touch in the space of an hour. And I think Argentina was the highest country, or Brazil, I can't remember, but UK was the lowest one.
Which one?
The UK was the lowest one. I don't know. I can't remember which country. They didn't do the whole world. You see what I mean? But because again, healthy touch. Touch in our culture, we also have categorized touch as being okay, almost only in the context of sex.
Yeah.
Or like, maybe like cuddling small children, but it's like
not even that. Not even that. I don't think you cuddle. I mean, here, people don't cuddle small children as well. Certainly not as much as we do. So it makes you think alone. Like, I remember, for example, being with another young mom, or a mom of a young kid like mine. And I remember I set up everything, like we were setting up a space to be with them and chat and blah. And I just put everything on the floor, and I was gonna sit there on the floor because he was like maybe something. So that was kind of like our natural way of being, because I need that proximity. And then she came in with a couple chairs for us.
Yeah.
And she sat on the chair and the baby was on the floor. And I felt really like, oh, like it caught me by surprise, because I was so involved physically that for me sitting on a chair made absolutely no sense in that moment. And that's when I noticed how different I naturally behave physically. And yes, this is massive, and that is why of all the tools that I have explored and I work with, I will always go back to massage, especially here, because we're in a deep need of loving touch, of like actual caring touch. And because, as you said, massage is a tool for altered states.
And I want to actually talk briefly, because that's something I know you use and I use too, that when you were talking about holistic therapy, for me, when I do closing of the bone massage, and I put massage in quotation marks because it's a ritual.
Yeah.
It takes 2 or 3 hours. Again, that's another thing that really struck me earlier this week when I've been offered therapy through the NHS, and I realized, I started going to see a counselor, and it's a 50-minute appointment. My husband is a counselor. The whole model is a 50-minute appointment. But I barely get going in 50 minutes. And then the session finished. And I thought, who came up with the idea that therapy needs to happen in 50-minute batches? And in between, you don't have access to the person, because you're supposed to only have your moments of bringing up whatever's going on.
It's very weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very weird. So the closing of the bones, a number of times I have offered this ritual to people for healing, and people have said to me, oh, I thought I was just getting a massage. Because what they think a massage is a Western 1 hour, you lie on the table, or
Yeah.
people massage your back. It's not, you know. So I'd like you to maybe tell us a bit more about that, because I know it's what I'm trying to explain to people is exists all around the world, this kind of
Yeah.
practice, you know, and it's not just for the postpartum.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there is, because we're like depleted from ritual and touch,
Yeah.
obviously that closing of the bones ritual is completely out of, like, is unconceivable
Yeah.
because it's like way too much touch and way too much symbolic stuff happening there. So, you know, like it's completely out of place if you want here.
Can you just very briefly describe it, because we both know what we're talking about, but not everybody listening might, you know.
Yes. So basically what we do on the closing of the bones is let's talk about in a postpartum setting, although this expands to so many other moments of our life. We are bringing the body back into itself and allowing for a moment of real deep touch with, you know, the, I would say, the great mother,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can feel held because you've gone through a massive transition. You are completely open physically and energetically, and you need to be able to be held and, what we would say in Colombia, contained,
Yeah.
so that you don't like you know, like kind of like melt away, because that's how you feel after a birth, isn't it? Like you're so open, like you feel like you're pouring out. So in that space you have body work, you are wrapped, you are wrapped in these throws and then
Yeah.
you're left there with either music, or you're sung to, or you have drumming. You're bathed as well before with
Yeah.
plants and stuff, so it's a proper ceremony.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned this just now, because when you were talking about the counseling, I'm going to counseling too, but what I want is a closing of the bones.
I
I
mean,
was thinking,
how old is your son now?
he's 3, and
Yeah,
I
so
had a
I want a
closing.
closing of the bone because I'm at the cusp of the menopause.
Yes,
You know, and
exactly.
I want a closing of the bone because I have had some challenges over the
Yes,
last couple of years, and I like,
yes,
I'm feeling I need to train. I'm trying to train more people in my community because I want more people to.
to do it.
But like now, because I've actually informally trained most of my community in doing it with just the scarf, not the whole ritual, but just the
Yeah,
binding, and people are so conscious that it's now become something we do for people's birthdays. And every time we do it at the birthday, men and women, just a
yeah.
wrapping with 7 reposers, but held by a big group of people, and then we do the singing and we do the
That
drumming.
feels
And
so
we do
amazing.
it the way that Mexican midwife now Livy never taught me, which I didn't really know until I trained with her in person last year, where she is very time consuming because she said to hold each scarf however tight the person wanted, say, over each part of the body. So 7 scarves, the head, the shoulders, the
Yeah,
ribs, the hips, the both part of the legs and the feet. And she said to tighten it and then hold it however long the person tells you it's long enough. And when I've done it alone, sometimes I've sweated like and really
oh my
uncomfortable
god,
because
it's
I've held
inaccurate.
it over the pelvis like sometimes for 15 minutes. And sometimes I say, let me know when I repeat, let me know when it's done. And the person says nothing. So I'm like, I have to wait and I'm
It
squatting. But
is.
in a group it's really beautiful because then there's people holding each end of the scarf. And so there's no like, you know, it's more
Yeah,
powerful, but also like last time we did it for a man's birthday, a friend of my community, there was another guy and he saw how powerful it was. So now he wants it for his birthday.
yes,
So we're bringing it back. But, you know,
yes.
I interrupted the sort of what you were busy talking about, the
The wanting of the
you wanting that yourself. So tell me about wanting that yourself, and then we'll probably need to bring that to a close because I know we could talk for 3
oh my
hours.
god, we could,
I
we're
said we
already
need to
gone
try
like
this
this.
podcast to an hour roughly, and we're kind of slightly over that already.
Yes, but I mean, this is part of it, isn't it? Because when you're there, you're in a state of trance if you do it properly, right?
Yeah,
So I had a really cool one with 2 doulas, drumming, bathing, and the whole shebang. And now I want it again because I had it at the end of my quarantine. So, you know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
after the 40 days. And then I now wanted, because I've started working again and Jasper's gone to school, and I feel like I've been through fire.
Yeah,
like I've been
literally,
through like the deepest, like, I mean, darkness I've ever experienced in my life. And I feel like I now need this to close that
chapter.
process and move on. And this is so important, just to touch on, because this is one of the things that we wanted to talk about, isn't it? Like how this is important through transition.
Yes.
So trance is important through transition. Almost the word kind of implies it. Trance and transitions must go hand in hand. And ritual of any sort is what helps us like kind of really leave things in the past, or ground them, put them on the earth and just move on. But because we don't do this, we're just like dragging all these like stuff. It's like all your life experiences, because you never take the time to properly have closures through transitions. And we have
It's
so
also
many.
being witnessed, right?
Yes.
Because when that happens, you can't do it for yourself. So,
no, and this is something very important, because when there's like a type of say ritual called psychomagic.
Yeah.
And when you do a psychomagic, someone has to see you, like you have to do it in front of someone. And when I recommended this to people, they're like, oh, but can I just like do it in my room? And I'm like, no, because part of the thing about ritual and ceremony is that when people see you doing it, it's like you're really doing it. Because it's not like a little, it's the same as I was saying about singing in the shower. It's not the same as singing with a massive group of people.
Yeah.
I mean,
the image that's popping into my mind now because of what you said about, transition and kind of letting go, is like, it's almost like if you were there's some animal that shed their skin, or their, say a snake is often an snake medicine. And can you imagine that basically what we're doing in our culture is we're carrying the old skin, like layers of it, because nobody's gone and done something, held a container for us to go, yes, this was hard, I've grown, I've left my old skin behind, and it's time to like have that held and witness and allow you to go really in and experience from a place of safety and altered state, the enormity of what you've gone through. Because if we're talking about women's life transition, there's obviously menarche, which is the first period, matrescence, which is the first, mother becoming a mother, and sagescence, which is a word that Jane Hardy uses for the menopause. So I would say adolescence, matrescence, and sagescence. And there's so many parallels for me. Now I'm going, I've been going through perimenopause for 11 years. And I keep thinking, oh my God, I have so many aspects of what's happening. I feel like I did when my children were little.
Yeah.
Because of the lack of holding.
Yeah.
The lack of
is everything.
Being guided by elders who have gone through the process, who understand the enormity of the rite of passage, because those things last for a long time. The same with puberty, the same with matrescence, and the same with, and again, our culture, and that's something that I'll probably finish on that, but Jane Hardwick Collins said to me in the interview I did with her, when something is systematically shamed, ridiculed, downplayed, or presented as just an hindrance, just a problem, think about bleeding, menstruation, think about giving birth, think about menopause. It's always a sign that it holds great power.
Yeah, totally. And it's just like, and that's why we just take all value out of it and just try and go past it as quick as we can. But as I was saying just now, like I'm feeling just now that I'm finishing my postpartum now, So these things take a long time to process, and the more we do it with the support of community and the support of Trance, the easier and the quicker they would be. But because we don't have that, then we're losing, we're missing out on like an amazing tool for processing and for happiness and for peace. So a lot of work to do.
So I'm going to bring this interview to a close, Laura. Thank you very much. Just want to finish by asking where can people find you? And we'll put a link underneath this episode, but I just wanted to
Mm,
ask you to share that.
yeah, so best place I'd say is my Instagram, which is at White Owl Therapies. And there's a link there to like a link tree. So all my stuff, all my little bits and bobs can be found in there.
Lovely.
That's the easiest.
Well, thank you very much, Laura. I
Thank you
really
for the
enjoyed this
invite.
conversation with you.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.